Good morning, good evening. If anyone wonders why I say that, because when I record it, I don't know where you are. You could be anywhere. You could be on time zone in any day, in fact. But regardless of all that, welcome to the Grain Market Blast. It is finally Friday. It looks like we made it. Didn't know I could sing.
You say finally Friday, like this week hasn't gone by in a blur.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, you make
I
a
feel
very.
like like the entire year so far is like equal
Yeah,
to being on a bender
I
at this
know.
point.
I, I know it's kind of this very British thing to do is just talk about the weather when you're bored and stuff like that. And I know sometimes we do seem to keep talking about this, but genuinely, I do not know. Maybe it's because, startup and everything else, and there's been a load of news coming out. I genuinely do not know where this year's gone. Like,
No,
I swear to God, it was Easter last week. And I'm not making that up.
you say finally Friday, like it's been this epic journey. Like I literally just woke up Monday morning at 3:45. I
In
don't know how I
March.
got here. So yeah, March 1st. Like it
Yeah,
was January 23rd yesterday. I'm not sure what happened. So
exactly
anywho,
that.
good thing
Exactly. Anyway, anywho, yes. So welcome to the. Sorry, ignore me and Angie just rattling on. As you, if you didn't already know, we record these live, so apologies if we go off on tangents and occasional swears, normally by me. But it is the Grain Market Blast, where Angie, the goddess of grain, will be giving us a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, I'll get the boring legals out the way. As usual, nothing at all you hear on this podcast is trading or investment advice. Why would it be? Why would you listen to it anyway? To make trading decisions. You'd be a moron to base trading decisions just off something you hear on a podcast. Also, nothing we say or any companies we make, nothing's endorsement. No one gives us any money, though we would take it if you offered it to us. But it's Friday. I'll let Angie crack on and then we can all go down the pub.
Woohoo! I can't go to
Woohoo!
the pub. I mean, I can go to the pub. I'm
I'm in the
self-employed.
pub.
I
I
can't
hate
do
to
that.
break it to you. I am in the pub.
I know. I don't even expect anything less. It's Friday. So, hi, everybody. Happy
Hi.
Friday. Big thing, biggest thing I'm looking at. I feel like this is just like, we'll call this episode China stuff because that's about where we're at right now. This is a big weekend
China.
for everyone. I hope you're stretching your hamstrings, doing your calisthenics to start and putting your helmet on. A few different things happened yesterday that had my attention, and I'd really like your opinion on a hypothesis
Oh,
I
God.
have. And, because you talk to lots of smart people too. And
Ah,
so you did see
hang on.
yesterday.
You're literally the only smart person I talk to.
I'm going to nod. I was giving a nod to Michael Brown,
Yeah,
honestly.
but
Like,
yeah, oh,
so,
shit, I forgot about him. Yeah.
right? Mr. Who? But no, the China thing. So the one thing that we saw yesterday, and I'll kind of laid the groundwork too, because there were a few different things. So obviously we have the meeting this weekend in Malaysia, and Basent has kind of come out and been like, yo, software, jet engines, fresh water if we have control of it. Like it's all on the table. We don't care.
Everything.
You know what I mean? Like we are going to come at you sideways. And then, what is most interesting, and I don't know if we've really gotten confirmation other than out of like France. I think Macron, or I always put the wrong emphasis and the wrong syllable with him. But anyway, you've got, they're kind of supportive of it or whatever, where the G7 countries will also join in with any of these sort of export
Yes.
controls. And so that's kind of a bit of a twist, you know what I mean? In the sense that everyone's like, all right, fine, control your rare earths. We will control these things that you also need as much as we need your rare earths to a
Yeah.
certain extent. Um,
I am getting kind of like escalate the rhetoric to de-escalate the rhetoric vibes from this.
I think that's the easiest way, right? Like we're ripping off the band-aid at this point.
Yeah.
I approve, like I hate it because it's so volatile, but at the same time, like I'd rather do this than play just the tip for the next 3 years,
Yes.
honestly.
Oh,
And
God.
so
And there was me.
say it as hard
I
as you
swear
get
to
there.
God, I was sitting here going, should I say my favorite cliche, which is all fart, no poo? And I was holding back. And then you just say, let's just play. We don't want to play just the tip for a year or more.
Here
That's
we
going to,
are.
I'll tell you what,
It's Friday. It's
that,
frisky.
that better go, better make it into the AI summary. I'll give you a clue.
Frisky Friday. Anyway, I'd rather do that than just, mess around with the next 3.5 years or whatever. And then in the end, blah, blah, blah. And so I think when it all comes down to it, I think we've kind of seen the soybeans take a little bit of a back seat. And to be completely honest, one second, the crop, I'm cool with that. Like I've said a million times, like, just buy what we're expecting to buy at this point because, I think the crop size is small. I think we want to I think we need to tread carefully with this idea that we need
Right.
to bulk up demand and some of these other things. Like at this point, I'm just kind of like, let's not get crazy with the cheese whiz on trade deals. But speaking of trade deals, the thing that really caught my attention yesterday, and I did a little bit of I don't even want to call it a deep dive because it wasn't. It was
A rabbit
shallow.
hole. A rabbit hole.
I went into a tiny little rabbit hole on, when China or when the administration announced that they were going to launch an investigation into the compliance of phase one. And everyone's kind of like, oh, yeah, we know they didn't do it. Okay, yes, that is right. They didn't. But in phase one, in writing, basically it says that if neither party follows through on their side of the deal and the other party, basically files an appeal or whatever, it opens the door to tariffs and all of these other things. Like they can
Right.
basically retaliate however they see fit in the sense that, if the other party is, like I said, found to be out of compliance, obviously out of compliance, and doesn't fix or remedy their lack of compliance within a certain amount of time.
Right.
Why this matters, which everyone's like, oh, we already have tariffs. It doesn't really matter. Why this matters, in my opinion, is there has been a lot of conversation about the Supreme Court and all of that, you know what I mean? Like the Supreme Court, the ruling in China, kind of waiting for the Supreme Court ruling to see if Trump has the power or not to put these tariffs in place. Basically, the way I'm seeing the compliance factor in the trade deal, I'm sorry, my dog has, I'm gonna punch him. Yeah, I'm gonna start kicking these guys out in the morning because they obviously don't know that this is important. But one of the biggest things is in the compliance side of things, if they're deemed out of compliance, they can then put the tariffs in place. So
Right.
where I'm going with this is if the Supreme Court were to find that Trump's tariffs were illegal, which is what some folks have said China was kind of waiting for to do anything, in this instance, they still would be deemed legal because I think the administration could say, no, we had a deal. The deal said that if they didn't follow through, the tariffs, you know what I mean? And so I think it just kind of gives the administration at
Yes.
the very least a loophole with, what could be enforcement going forward with some of these tariffs that we have.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that, Ryan?
Well, I concur with what you've said, the smartest person in the room. Well, I'll be very honest. So apart from getting into the technicalities of that, I think zooming out a little bit, I think I mentioned it. It was either on this show at some point this week or the Morning Blast at some point this week, where I think that all of the rhetoric we've seen, all the language we've seen from, well, both sides really, US and China, I really think that it's just setting up to lay groundwork for the talk so people don't think it's too kind of easy. Again, de-escalate the rhetoric. I think, both sides want to go into this thinking they're in a position of strength and, we have more levers to pull if we need to. But I do honestly think that, again, I'm going to end up with egg on my face come Monday morning. But I really do think that it could, the signs are there for a productive call, productive meeting rather. Again, I know I'm kind of making a rough my own back here, but I'm relatively bullish because I think Trump's going to want to see a strong stock market going into year end. We've got midterms are kind of starting to creep up on us. They've already announced there's going to be no CPI data next month. So it's all going to be, he's going to be judging his, term. Well, he's going to be judging his performance based on the stock market. He's not going to come away, or the US administration aren't going to come away from, this weekend's meeting and then the following Trump and Xi meeting with anything other than good news, in my opinion. But I'm prepared to come back.
I don't think they have a choice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Spin it no matter what. Yeah.
Exactly. Like now I've said it, obviously you might as well sell everything, but that's besides
Both hands
no
out
investment
right
advice,
now.
no trading advice.
Right. But no, I think that's the case. I think both parties at this point in time, and I think you see it, and there was an article in the Wall Street Journal today that was very well written and is, comes from a source that I really trust.
Whoa. Is this
Sorry, I know.
Is this Angie Setzer praising some
Any
financial
media?
media? Whoa. Is this a cry for help? Blink twice.
I have been kidnapped. You now have to come find me. But no, there really was. And in it, there was a mention that, there's talk that China is looking to buy, which I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning, but there were a lot of rumors yesterday that China was in and sniffing around for soybeans and as well as soft white wheat. And so, there is talk that they're really looking to maybe make some purchases here. in the short term,
Yeah, yeah.
and that would not be the least bit surprising thing. First off, they need to buy bushels. Like they have a bit of a short here, December, January timeframe, and you're not really going to extract that out of South America. It's going to be very
Right.
difficult to do. You're already seeing, signs of tightness. Though I have to backtrack a little bit. Basis in Brazil kind of continues to weaken a little bit on the anticipation that there is a trade deal and that the China comes in and buys from the US in the short term and in the deferred time frame. I also though think that there's probably something happening where I've talked about before with arbitrage where
Okay.
basis
Yeah.
and different things. And so that's probably unwinding a little bit of the Brazil cash market too, potentially, in the sense of, maybe they aren't going to load as many of these exports or as much as what they had anticipated. That's just me speaking.
So you've raised Brazil there, which I think is funny enough. That came up on the Friday Fix podcast I just did with the awesome guys at Alpha Picks. As your name says it on the tin, we do it every Friday. But we mentioned Brazil in this, and I raised the point that obviously we've been speaking recently in the last week or so on the Grain Blast with your good self about the US being very friendly to the Milei administration because it's their friendly government in South America. Yeah, especially now with the beef, they're looking for more beef imports, etc., etc. Then you look what's going on in Venezuela, very much not a friendly country at the moment. Also now with Colombia. And I made the argument to the guys at Alpha Pix that I think we'll see a lot of softening of language to Brazil. If we
Oh
go
yeah.
back 6 months or so, Brazil, 50, I think it's 50% tariffs. This is top of my head. I apologize. I've had a cider, so I
Oh, it
might be
is
well off.
right. Yeah. We've
Yeah,
already.
and it was kind of Brazil weren't seen as a very friendly country. But I think the Trump administration are kind of, so we had the headline yesterday, Trump saying that, he can foresee troops on the ground or kind of land, military intervention or whatever on the ground in Venezuela. So, he will want to make as many
Yeah.
friends in South America as he can with friendly governments. Obviously, Milei's already done. Obviously, we've got the big election on Sunday. So Trump, the Trump administration are praying that Milei does well in this, but also hedging their bets, cuddling up to the Brazilian government. So I'll be interested to see what happens there because obviously we know,
Yeah.
yeah, because obviously we know one of the things that's happened is China have gone to Brazil. Now, it won't take a lot for Trump to kind of go to Lula and say, well, hang on a second. We want to be your friend more than China. We can do more for you than China.
Mhm.
What deal can we come to? So we might get that Brazil all of a sudden might become less friendly to China. I think there's a lot at play here at the moment.
That's the thing. Like that's what and I that's what I've struggled with, throughout much of the conversation about grain and grain movement and what's going to happen in cash and all of this gnashing of teeth that we've
Yeah.
had over the destruction of demand, forever or whatever. Like and I get it. I get that it's easy to kind of paint this picture and think that that's what's going to happen, but there are a heck of a lot more moving pieces than just that. And Brazil does rely on, and I'm not. Oh darn, I am noisy today.
What's that?
Just like dropping things everywhere. I can't even help it. I have no control over myself. But you've got Brazil and the US do work really closely. Yes, China is one of their biggest partners, and if I think the biggest partner, but then we have a different relationship. Like
Yes.
there's a,
Yeah.
a more
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
financial, and I'm not going to try to talk out of turn. I have to be really careful with that. But you
Yeah.
have seen, basically Lula cozy up to Trump, and to a certain extent, he has to be really careful too, because somewhat, even we talked about this with our friend Nick yesterday. He has to be careful too, simply because part of this battle with Trump's helped with his popularity to a certain extent because he stood up really.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
he didn't throw back retaliatory tariffs or anything, but he didn't
Yeah.
also,
But I think we've got to look at nuances with stuff like that. Brazil and so Lula and Trump, they haven't fallen. There's been no spats backwards and forwards like we've had with other nations. Literally, like you said, Lula just kind of stood up and said, "Well, if that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do." The door is open. The door is open to kind of for these conversations to get friendly very quickly, in my opinion.
yes, Yeah, and so I think you'll see that. I think you see that with Brazil, and so I think there's some leverage, additional leverage there with China, and China doesn't want it. China doesn't want to have to keep trying to leverage some of these relationships that they already have or re-leverage relationships that they've already created. And so I do think, yeah, I think over the weekend you see some pretty positive groundwork.
Yeah.
Sense pretty confident that that's what happens. It's Bissett and Greer, I believe, that are doing
Yes.
the
Yeah.
negotiating, and so I feel good about that. I don't know. Apparently, they did forget that Lutnick existed, so high five there.
Poor Lachlan.
Remember we said that before? Can we leave him at home? And so we'll see if what is Shane Gong, the one that called for the NVIDIA
Oh,
investigation
yeah.
right in
Yeah,
front
yeah,
of
yeah.
Bissett. Oh, I like it. I want to just high five. Can you imagine having a set that big, like just doing like, oh, you don't like what I'm doing? All right, well, I guess I'll call it invest. I'm a wimp. I'm a little jealous of it. But yeah, so we'll see where that comes and what it all looks like. But I'm gonna say the biggest thing right now is this whole conversation that like, oh, processor basis continues to firm because the farmer's holding bushels out of the pipeline is a little silly. Yeah, is the farmer holding some additional beans out of the pipeline? Does it have a huge, could it have a big impact on movement or something like that? Sure. But we have local processors here that are talking about being down, 30% or more. The farmer is not holding on to 30% or more of beans. And either it's not happening in the rest of the Corn Belt either. If it was, you would see it in the corn basis.
Right. Yeah. Futures for
Because
show, cash for dough.
exactly. And so just, we're going to have to watch and see, but we pretty much can guarantee the crop was not as big as expected. And we leaned heavily upon double crop beans this year, and that was a bad idea because we just didn't get the rain. Like I
Yeah.
saw someone the other day post pictures. He's like, they're like grains of sand, which is a little bit of an exaggeration, but BBs, yes. And BBs are hard to harvest and BBs are not for dough. They just don't do you any good as a bean. So we'll see how this day plays out. We're obviously up towards the higher end of the range. If anything bullish happens, we have to break out against the high side or the downtrend. And November beans, we have to get above 1060. So I'm not holding my breath just ahead of the weekend unless we get some sort of weird, rogue positive headline on day one. But otherwise, we'll see. Really, the rest of the weekend, you're going to see harvest pretty much wrap up across a good portion of the Corn Belt. If not, like Michigan, we're still behind. We had a really crappy week this week, but guys will start to roll again here this weekend. We'll probably wrap up here over the next 2 weeks or so, but we'll be the last ones, us and our northern brethren. But yeah, really, we'll just be paying attention to that. The Russia-Ukraine situation, I'm trying to wrap this up quickly here, is the other thing I want to talk, just really quickly.
Honestly, like, if don't feel you need to rush on my accounts, but again, as I always say, it's all value. It's all value. So it
There's a
doesn't
lot
matter if you
going
go
on
over.
right now that is of interest to me, and the other thing that I really think we have to watch, so I appreciate that, is we continue to hear of deteriorating logistics in the Black Sea,
Right.
both
Yeah.
for Russia and for Ukraine. Russia is going to try to do what they can to accelerate the export of wheat right now. And, everyone keeps talking, I need to get some actual loading numbers. There's been some excitement over their loadings this month, I believe. There's some optimism, but it's odd, because we're just not seeing Russia participate in a lot of these tenders. They're going to have to because now they don't have the oil revenue.
Yeah. Well, this is it, right? Exactly.
If the Trump administration really wanted to put the hoses to them, they'd also start to hit their wheat exports, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't think they'll do that because it looks bad with food and some of these other
That's
things.
exactly what I was about to say. I was like, I think the only reason they're not doing that is because the people that are buying Russian wheat, Russian grains are dependent on them, and they need those grains, and you can't be seen to be like withholding food from starving people.
Yeah,
right?
the rest of the world. It is interesting to note, though, that Egypt continues to buy French wheat.
Yes, you mentioned this. Was it at the start?
Yeah.
Dates guy just almost. It was either at the start of this week or in the last week. I remember you saying that before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been just kind of continuous. And that, like I said, I mean, it's not something that is completely unheard of, but it typically happens, like it is something that typically happens when we don't have significant Russia
Right.
supply, or they just don't feel comfortable with the risk. And that's where I'm at right now, is if the Russian price, if the Ukrainian price is the same, and that you can guarantee, execution on shipment by buying out of the US or France, like, to be completely honest, we could probably start charging a bit of a premium and we would still be okay
Yeah.
from a bit
Yeah.
standpoint. So yeah, so really from an overall standpoint, the literal only hole in grain demand is China not making purchases of soybeans. If this changes over the weekend or over the next 10 days, hold on to your butt, especially if they decide to be like, yeah, we're going to really show you how much we love you.
Yeah.
And we're going to going to make a quick 10 million metric ton purchase in a market that's already struggling to source bushels that it needs.
Right.
And so if I were China, that's what I'd do. I'd just slap it right across the face. I'd just be like, fine, I see you're struggling over there sourcing supplies. I guess I should buy a lot of them and just see what happens. But maybe that's just me daring them to do it. I dare you. I dare you to run beans to
Yeah,
hell in
right.
China. Anyway, so that's not a price forecast, by the way. But anyway, I think we're done now.
Perfect. Well, Angie, thank you so much. As always, my love. I really, really appreciate these conversations. I know our listeners do too. Whatever you are doing, sorry, it's about to get very noisy here. Whatever you're doing this weekend, please stay safe, keep it tight. If you are finishing up on harvest, congratulations. You've worked very hard. Go and treat yourself to a few beers I'll say on us, but we're not going to pay for them. But whatever you're doing this weekend, much love, keep it tight, and we'll see you all on Monday. Stay safe.